Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 20th April 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below, along with other descriptions. So, on this note, let's start our today's discussion. This news appears on page number 1. It says, chemists and druggists are pass. From now, all will be pharmacies. Now, this news highlights that as per the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the term chemist and druggist will be replaced by the term pharmacy. Now, as of now, the word drug is referred to something in addition to medicines or certain chemicals. And therefore, the word drug connotes a very negative impact on the pharmacy. And therefore, the word druggist or drug is not quite suitable while referring to a professional pharmacist. So, it was in this aspect that repeated requests were made to the Drug Technical Advisory Board to replace this word druggist and chemist with a single word pharmacy. Now, this was also recommended by the 55th Drug Consultative Committee meeting held in January and March of 2019. So, in this news analysis, let us understand about certain basic facts with respect to Drug Technical Advisory Board as well as about Central Drugs Standards Control Organization, which functions under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. In your prelims examination, this topic gets covered under Social Sector Initiative, whereas in your mains, this gets covered under GS Paper 2, specifically under Statutory and Regulatory Organizations. The Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940 defines the term the Drugs Technical Advisory Board, the Central Drugs Laboratory, and the Drugs Consultative Committee. It says that the Drugs Technical Advisory Board, that is DTAB, shall be constituted by the central government, and its purpose shall be to advise the central government and the state governments on technical matters arising out of the administration of this particular act, and also to carry out various functions assigned to the Drugs Technical Advisory Board. Further, the Drugs and Cosmetic Acts also mentions about Drugs Consultative Committee, and this committee shall be in advisory in nature, and its function shall be to advise the central government, the state government, and also the Drugs Technical Advisory Board on any matter with respect to ensuring uniformity of administration of this act throughout the country. So, the Drugs Consultative Committee shall advise the central government, the state government, as well as the Drugs Technical Advisory Board on any matter to ensure uniformity with respect to administration or implementation of this act throughout India. So, these are the two important terms with respect to Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. Now, apart from that, you must also know about CDSCO, that is the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization, and this functions under the Directorate General of Health Services under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now, this particular paragraph has been taken directly from the website of the ministry. It says that the CDSCO is the National Regulatory Authority and has 6 zonal offices, 4 subzonal offices, and 13 post offices, including 7 laboratories spread across the country. Now, with respect to its functions, it mentions that the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of 1940 and also the rules made under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act has entrusted different responsibilities to central and state regulators with respect to regulation of drugs and cosmetics. So basically, the CDSCO regulates drugs and cosmetics throughout the country, including states. Now, CDSCO, by implementing the acts and rules, ensures safety rights as well as well-being of the patients. It further mentions that CDSCO constantly thrives upon to bring out transparency, accountability, and uniformity in its services in order to ensure safety, efficacy, and quality of the medical product manufactured, imported, as well as distributed in the country. So basically, CDSCO, apart from implementing the rules, also ensures safety, efficacy, and quality of medical product manufacturing as well as its import and distribution in the country. So these are some of the important functions with respect to CDSCO. So in this news analysis, you must understand about the Drugs Technical Advisory Board, Drugs Consultative Committee, as well as the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization, which functions under the Directorate General of Health Services. So with this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 5. It says Ganga has higher proportion of antibacterial agents as per a study. The isolated components hold great potential as an antibacterial pharmaceutical. Now, study was commissioned by the Union Ministry of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Regeneration. And the purpose of the study was to find out the unique properties of River Ganga. So, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, that is NEERI, submitted a report which was titled Assessment of Water Quality and Sediment to understand the special properties of River Ganga. This report found out that river water contains a significantly higher proportions of organisms having antibacterial properties. And it was also found that this higher proportion of organisms having antibacterial properties in the river Ganga was particularly higher in the upper Himalayan stretches. Now, this topic in your prelims examination becomes a part of general issues on environmental ecology, biodiversity, as well as climate change, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3, especially under environment. The study with respect to this particular report to understand special properties of river Ganga was conducted by the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. Now, NEERI was asked to assess the quality of the tributary of river Ganga, that is Bhagirathi, as well as the entire river Ganga at 20 different sampling stations with respect to radiological, microbiological, and biological parameters. Further, as a part of the assessment, 5 pathogenic species of bacteria were selected and isolated. Apart from river Ganga, NEERI was also asked to assess the special properties with respect to river Yamuna as well as river Narmada. And as a part of this assessment, 5 pathogenic species of bacteria were selected and isolated from these 3 rivers. These 5 bacteria which were selected and isolated are Escherichia, Enterobacter, Salmonella, Shigella, and Vibrio. Further, the number of these bacteria present in the river water was also compared to the bacteriophages present in these 3 rivers, that is Ganga, Yamuna, and Narmada. Now, bacteriophages are a kind of virus which kills bacteria or either eats bacteria and are also found in proximity to these bacteria. So, as per the report, these number of bacteria was also compared with the bacteriophages present in these 3 different rivers, that is Ganga, Yamuna, and Narmada. Now, it says that a bacteriophage is a type of virus that infects bacteria, and in fact, the word bacteriophage literally means bacteria eater, and these bacteriophages destroy their host cells. So it says all bacteriophages are composed of a nucleic acid molecule that is surrounded by a protein structure. So as you can see in this picture, these bacteriophages are composed of a nucleic acid molecule surrounded by a protein structure. Now, a bacteriophage attaches itself to a susceptible bacteria and infects the host cell. So, this bacteriophage attaches itself to a susceptible bacteria and infects the host cell. So, this particular virus attaches itself to the bacteria and infects it. It says that following the infection, the bacteriophage hijacks the bacteria's cellular machinery to prevent it from producing bacterial components and instead forces the cell to produce viral components. So basically, this virus hijacks the entire bacteria and forces this bacteria to produce viral components instead of producing bacterial components. So after infecting these bacteria, this virus forces the bacteria to produce viral components and then assemble and burst out of the bacteria in a process called lysis. So it was found that in river Ganga, bacteriophages which were detected were 3 times more in proportion as compared to the bacteria that were isolated. Further, samples from river Ganga contained almost 1100 kinds of bacteriophages, whereas samples from river Yamuna and Narmada had significantly less bacteriophages as compared to river Ganga. Now, the report also mentioned that the bacteriophages present in river Ganga varied in different stretches along the flow of the river, as 33% more bacteriophages were present in the Gomukh Tehri region as compared to the Mana Haridwar stretch as well as the Bijnor Varanasi stretch. Further, in the stretch from Patna to Ganga Sagar, it was found that only 60% of the bacteriophages was present as compared to what was present in the Gomukh Tehri region. So we understand that these bacteriophages are present in the river Ganga in different quantities or in different percentage across the stretch of the river. Further, these viruses isolated from river Ganga also holds antibacterial properties and also holds great potential as an antibacterial pharmaceutical. Thus, this news becomes important with respect to higher proportion of antibacterial agents present in river Ganga and also with respect to bacteriophage, as bacteriophage is a kind of virus which destroys bacteria and also destroys their host cells. So this topic becomes very important from your prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 5. It says Indian Navy to take part in fleet review in China. It further mentions that Pakistan is not participating in this international fleet review event, which is to be held in 2019 in April in Guangdong in China. Now, in this event, Indian Navy has sent 2 ships, namely INS Kolkata and INS Shakti. Now, this topic from your prelims perspective becomes a part of current events of national and international importance, and in your mains it gets covered under GS paper 3, specifically under security. Now, as per the report highlighted on Press Information Bureau, the Ministry of Defence has stated that Indian Navy ships to participate in international fleet review at Guangdong in China. It says that Indian Navy ships Kolkata and Shakti are scheduled to arrive in Guangdong in China on 21st April 2019 to participate in the International Fleet Review. And this International Fleet Review is a part of 70th anniversary celebrations of PLA, that is People's Liberation Army. So in International Fleet Review, different countries parade their naval ships, aircraft and submarines, and it is organized in order to promote goodwill, strengthen cooperation and also to showcase their organizational capabilities of these different nations. It further mentions that the International Fleet Review also serves as an ideal platform for the world's navies to showcase their prowess as well as indigenous ship designing and shipbuilding capabilities. So in this news analysis, you must know about the purpose of International Fleet Review, as it serves as a platform to promote goodwill, strengthen cooperation and also showcase organizational capabilities of different countries. Now, this news also highlights that the second International Fleet Review conducted by India was in 2016 February in Vishakhapatnam, which saw an overwhelming participation of 50 navies with nearly 100 warships. Now, Indian Navy would be represented in the International Fleet Review at Guangdong by indigenously built stealth-guided missile destroyer INS Kolkata and fleet support ship, that is INS Shakti. INS Kolkata is equipped with state-of-the-art weapons and sensors in order to address threat in all dimensions of naval warfare, whereas INS Shakti is a replenishment ship. So this visit of Indian Navy's most potent destroyer and versatile fleet support ship showcases India's prowess, reach, as well as sustainability in addition to India's indigenous shipbuilding capability. And these ships are likely to sail in the evening of 22nd April 2019 to participate in the Naval Parade of Ships scheduled to be reviewed by the Chinese President Xi Jinping on 23rd April 2019. Thus, this particular news becomes important from your prelims point of view. And in this, you must know about the International Fleet Review of 2019, which will take place in Guangdong in China. And from India, INS Kolkata and INS Shakti will participate in the naval parade. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears in the editorial section on page number 6. It says, humanize the law. The draft Indian Forest Act must be redrawn to rid it of bureaucratic overreach. Now this editorial highlights about the draft Indian Forest Act of 2019 and says that it cannot be termed as a transformative piece of legislation from its predecessor act, that is the Indian Forest Act of 1927. So on this note, this editorial highlights certain problems with respect to the Indian Forest Act of 2019 and also provides certain suggestions which, according to this editorial, should be incorporated in the new law. So on this note, let us understand what this editorial aims to highlight with respect to the draft Indian Forest Act of 2019. Now in your prelims, this topic gets covered under Indian polity with respect to Act and also under general issues on environmental ecology as well as biodiversity. And in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Now Indian Forest Act of 1927 provides legal framework for the protection and management of forest. It provides for transit of foreign produce and timber. It provides for duty leviable on timber and other forest produce. So basically, the Indian Forest Act of 1927 is an umbrella act which provides the basic architecture for the management of forest in the country and also provide procedure to be followed for declaring an area to be a reserved forest, a protected forest or a village forest. Further, the Indian Forest Act of 1927 also defines what an forest offence is and also what are the activities which are prohibited inside a reserved forest. However, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has started the process of comprehensively amending the backbone of forest governance in India, that is the Indian Forest Act of 1927. So it is in this aspect that this editorial highlights about the draft Indian Forest Act of 2019 and says that it cannot be termed as a transformative piece of legislation from its predecessor act, that is Indian Forest Act of 1927. The editorial mentions that the Indian Forest Act of 1927 was drafted to suit colonial power by extracting benefits from forest. So it was in this aspect that the new Forest Act law must have made a departure from the previous act of 1927, and rather the new act should have aimed at expanding India's forest and must have also ensured the well-being of the traditional forest dwellers as well as the biodiversity of the entire forest. Further, the editorial also mentions that the new law must have made more emphasis on the conservation efforts which must have been scientifically validated and led by communities of the forest. As this editorial says that this conservation efforts which is scientifically validated and also led by communities of the forest is essential as well as critical to preserve very dense forest in India. And this very dense forest is only 2.99% of India's geographical area. Now this particular statistic was highlighted in the State of Forest Report 2017, which was conducted by the Forest Survey of India. Now the State of Forest Report of 2017 has classified forest in terms of canopy density classes. Now canopy is referred as the uppermost trees or branches of the trees, and in a forest they form a more or less continuous layer of foliage. As you can see in this picture, canopy refers to this particular part of the entire tree or a continuous series of tree. So the State of Forest Report 2017 has classified different kinds of forest based on the canopy density. For very dense forest, it refers to all lands with trees canopy density of 70% and above. With respect to moderately dense forest, it says that all lands with tree canopy density of 40% and more but less than 70%. With respect to open forest, it says that all lands with tree canopy density of 10% and more but less than 40%. Whereas for scrub, it says that degraded forest lands with canopy density less than 10%. And for non-forest, lands not included in any of the above classes. So with respect to these different types of forest cover, the report highlights the percentage of geographical area under different kind of forest covers. So for very dense forest, it is 2.99% of Indian territory. For moderately dense forest, it is 9.38%, whereas for open forest, it is 9.18%. So, the total forest cover for India is around 21.54%, in which scrub refers to 1.4% and non-forest area is about 77.06%. So it is in this aspect this editorial highlights that there should be more conservation efforts which should be based on scientifically validated principles and should also be led by communities residing in the forest in order to increase this category of very dense forest in India. Now, this editorial also highlights some of the problems with this Draft Forest Act of 2019. First of all, it says that it reinforces the idea of bureaucratic control over forest. The next problem highlighted is that it provides immunity for certain actions such as use of firearms by personnel to prevent an offense. It then mentions that this particular draft act provides for certain hardline approach which can be seen through the following provisions. There is a greater emphasis on creating an infrastructure with respect to detaining as well as transportation of the accused. It then says that for the offense of one individual, this law aims to penalize the entire community by denying access to forest. The editorial highlights that these problems are against the empowering and egalitarian goals which any forest law should have encompassed for the betterment of the people living in the forest. Another problems highlighted in this editorial is that the forest department has resisted independent scientific evaluation with respect to forest health and biodiversity conservation outcomes. Another problem highlighted is that environmental policy has also weakened public scrutiny of decisions on diversion of forest for activities such as mining, large dam construction, which have been harmful for the forest. So these can be said to be some of the problems highlighted in this editorial with respect to Draft Indian Forest Act of 2019. So editorial has certain suggestions. It says that a new forest law should aim to reduce conflicts, incentivize tribals, and should also stop diversion of non-forest use. And this can be achieved by recognizing all suitable landscapes as forest and also by insulating them from commercial exploitation. And in this aspect, the editorial highlights that such an approach should require partnership from communities of the forest as well as from scientific experts. So effectively, this editorial concludes by saying that the new government should have a relook into the new law on forest. Further, the new government also needs to launch a process of consultation along with state governments in order to ensure that a progressive law is adopted by all states. So the central government, while framing a policy, must work in collaboration with state governments, all stakeholders, and the communities, including independent scientific experts. So these are some of the suggestions with respect to the new law as provided in this editorial. Thus, this particular editorial becomes extremely important with respect to our upcoming examination, both from your prelims as well as from our mains perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news appears on page number 18. It says, cases of measles show alarming rise, warns World Health Organization. Global data shows a jump of 300% in the first 3 months of 2019 compared to the same period last year. Now, in 2012, the World Health Assembly endorsed the Global Vaccine Action Plan. Under this plan, countries have adopted goals for elimination of measles by the year 2020. So, based on this Global Vaccine Action Plan, the World Health Organization has come out with the report titled Progress Towards Regional Measles Elimination Worldwide. So, in this analysis, let us learn what this particular report highlights about, and also let us learn the basics with respect to measles, rubella, and also about Mission Indradhanush. Now, this topic in your prelims examination becomes a part of social issues and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to services relating to health. So the report highlights that during 2000 to 2017, annual reported measles incidents decreased by 83%, and annual estimated measles death decreased by 80%. Further, the report highlights that since 2000, global measles elimination efforts have prevented an estimated 21.1 million deaths. However, despite all these achievements, measles elimination milestones have not been met. Further, incidence of measles has reached highest levels in 2 decades across Europe. And this is mainly attributed to lower vaccinations among the populations of Europe. Now, according to this report of WHO, at least 95% of population must have immunity to control spread of measles. But in several European countries, this figure is 85% or even less. And this is on account of parental neglect and mistaken belief that vaccine can cause autism. Moving further, let's learn about measles. It says measles or rubella is a viral infection of the respiratory system which can spread through contact with infected mucus and saliva. So measles is a viral infection of the respiratory system, and it is also a communicable disease which can spread through contact with infected mucus and saliva. Further, it says that an infected person can release the infection into the air when they cough or sneeze, and measles is a leading cause of death in children. The symptoms of measles are cough, fever, and also having red eyes. Further, a widespread skin rash is one of the basic symptoms of measles. Another important factor is that vitamin A deficiency is also considered to be a risk factor for measles. So, children with too little vitamin A in their diets have a higher risk of catching the virus, that is, measles. Moving on to rubella, it says that rubella is a mild viral infection which occurs most often in children and young adults. Further, rubella infection during pregnancy can cause abortion, stillbirth, and may also lead to multiple birth defects in the newborn baby. And these multiple birth defects can be blindness, deafness, heart defects, and this is known as congenital rubella syndrome or CRS. Further, it says that India accounts for around one third of all children born worldwide with congenital rubella syndrome. So, rubella is also a mild viral infection which occurs most often in children and young adults. And rubella infection during pregnancy can cause abortion, stillbirth, and can also lead to multiple birth defects in the newborn baby, like blindness, deafness, heart defects, and also congenital rubella syndrome. The government of India has launched Mission Indradhanush, and this is a health mission of the government of India which was launched in the year 2014 on 25th December. This particular scheme seeks to drive towards 90% full immunization coverage of India and also sustain the same by the year 2020. Now in India, vaccination is provided for prevention of disease such as diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, polio as well as measles. Thus, the highlights of this WHO report on progress towards regional measles elimination worldwide becomes important from our examination perspective. So after the discussions, these are your practice questions for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. First, it says vaccination is provided under Mission Indradhanush on which of the following diseases? Options are measles, child TB, polio, tetanus and AIDS. In this, AIDS is an incorrect option. So in this, first 4 options are correct. So here C is the correct answer, that is 1, 2, 3 and 4. As you can see in this picture, vaccination under Mission Indradhanush is provided for diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, tuberculosis, polio, hepatitis B and measles, and not for AIDS. Hence in this, the correct answer is C. Moving on to the second question, it says, consider the following statements. First, State of Forest report has been published by Forest Survey of India. Yes, the statement is correct. Second, very dense forest covers 27% of Indian geographical territory. No, the statement is incorrect. as it is mere 2.99%. Hence, in this, the correct answer is A, that is 1 only. Now, these are your practice question number 3 and 4. What you can do is to take a pause of another 5 seconds. Now, this says, consider the following statements. International Fleet Review 2019 will take place in China. Yes, this statement is correct. Second, India will not participate in International Fleet Review 2019 in protest. No, this statement is incorrect as India has sent INS Kolkata and INS Shakti to China. So in this, the first statement is correct. Hence the answer is A, that is 1 only. The fourth question says, consider the following statements about bacteriophage. First, it is a bacteria which engulfs the virus. No, bacteriophage refers to a virus which engulfs the bacteria or which kills the bacteria. Hence, the first statement becomes incorrect. Second, all bacteriophages are made of nucleic acid molecules surrounded by a protein structure. Yes, this statement is correct. So in this, the correct answer is B, that is 2 only. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.